Well, welcome to the project. It's good to have you here tonight. If you are a bit newer to the project, welcome. I am not part of the project. I am just speaking on behalf of Ruben, who's the lead here. If you were here last week, you know who I am. If you weren't here last week, you'll get to know who I am as I go through. Speaking of last week, I do want to mention some of the feedback that I got, which was like really positive weather, which is excellent. I talk really straightforward about sex, about porn, about just relationships, dating, where we're at. I speak really directly about it because I really feel like I want you to have better. And some of the feedback that I got was that there are some of you who had made decisions to start walking towards better sexual health. Specifically when it comes to just like pornography, masturbation, things like that, you're like, some of you felt like, I gotta do something about that. And here's what I wanna tell you tonight. Keep going. Just keep fighting that fight. I gotta tell you, the interesting thing is that when someone starts pulling away from those things, the brain heals faster than you think it does, but you gotta give yourself a chance. And I know some of you have been trying, and it's like, I wasn't batting at 100% here this past week. I gotta tell you, it doesn't matter. Keep going. Keep working at it. The enemy wants to steal, kill, and destroy you, and God is here to give you life and life to the fullest. And he doesn't have that as part of your plan in your life to be disappointed and ashamed and feel like you're hiding something. That is not God's best or even good for you. So if you're working at it and you're fighting it, I just want to encourage you, keep going. Don't be discouraged. Talk to someone. Keep open. Keep vulnerable, because you can experience freedom in that place in your life. And I got to say this. It's not just you who needs it. There's someone watching you that could be set free because you decided to do the hard work. So keep going. Cool, that's out of the way. Let's move on. Tonight, the question is this. So I spit a lot. I just realized I spat and something came out and some of you are grossed out. That's okay. Tonight, the question is this. Why are so many people choosing to live together and not really thinking marriage is all that important anymore, and kind of how do we respond to that? And I get it. Like, the premise is this. If you kind of think about it, living together kind of feels like it gives you an opportunity. The best way to say it, it's almost like the best Google review of a human. I love Google reviews. I check out restaurants, all those things. I actually put reviews up on Google. They sent me socks before. Like, Google sent me socks because of all the reviews I post, because I just like free things. And so I'm Portuguese, and so I'm cheap. So if you give me something free, I will exploit myself for that, right? To a point. And so I take pictures. I love Google reviews. I get it. And you think of living together, it's almost like a review. You get a chance to figure out who this person really is. It makes sense. Get an idea what it would be like to spend your life with someone. It makes sense, the adjustments and learning to make those things before you get married. Like, it seems like living together is a bit like a wise thing to do. Question, why are more people living together and not getting married as much? And it's like, how do I respond to that? Before I go, again, any further, I do remind you, if you're here last week, I'm just going to go over it really quick. If you weren't here last week, I encourage you to just, even if you just watched the first 10 minutes of last week, here's the premise I'm coming from, is that each one of you in this room, God has a call on your life. I believe firmly, secondly, that relationships, more than almost anything else in your life, will determine the trajectory of your life. There's nothing that will be as transformative in your life than the relationships you choose to have. Friends, dating, marriage, all those things, okay? Third thing is this. Dating is, and relationships are, really great. But you have to choose whether you're going to do them with wisdom or you're going to do them like a fool, all right? And the fourth thing is this, is that you are meant to be loved, and you're meant to be able to love others well. And we do believe, as declared in the Bible, that God is love. You're meant to know the love that God has for you, and you're meant to share that. So, the question that we need to ask then, in light of those four things, is, what do you want? And does it square with what God wants for you? That's a tough question in all these relationships, all these things. And it kind of sucks because there's so many things that we already have to be concerned about. Then you kind of throw the God card in it, and you're like, oh man, I'm going to buckle under the weight here. And this question specifically, this is actually the first time I've tackled this in kind of a lengthy area. And so I did a ton of just work and research and reading on what this looks like. And I'm kind of glad I did, because what I didn't know, because you're thinking, is this actually a really big deal? Is this something that people are doing? Here's what it says. So significantly, it says, more people are living in common law relationships. In Canada, common law, or like living together, increased by 447% between 1981 and 2021, with nearly 1/4 of all couples choosing to live together without being married. We have the highest rate of cohabitating couples in all G7 countries. Canada, wild. Now, partly due of Quebec. Leave it to Quebec, right? Interestingly enough, it is especially popular among younger generations aged 18 to 24. 79% of couples will choose to live together within that age group. A lot of you are wanting to or are shacking up. This is huge. This is a big deal. And I know some of you are like, hey, we're living together. What is he going to say about it? And you're feeling all tense. You're getting the sweats. And you're like, I wasn't choosing to be wet here, sweaty and gross. It's going to get a little tense, but I got to tell you, this is something that is happening. It's something that's real, and something, honestly, it seems to really make a lot of sense. And it says, Canadians are less likely to consider marriage as a necessary part of family life. This is what's happening in Canada. This is what's happening in your heads. This is what's happening around. In fact, probably a lot of you go to school, go to work, or other people, and you're thinking, yeah, we're just few people you know are living together. It's just kind of the next thing to do. And so what I've done is actually just are asking a series of questions that I thought maybe you'd ask about it, and that's how I'm going to answer. I know it's super annoying to have someone ask a question and they answer it for you, but I'm going to do it anyways, okay? It's the best way I can kind of formulate all this information. Well, do we know why people are doing this? What's the reason why people are deciding to live together? And it maybe seems really easy to kind of figure that out, but let me lay it out for you. Because there's been, over the last 40 plus years, a ton of research as to why it's growing so popular. And they say, first of all, secularization, which means that people are holding less and less to religious beliefs and norms. So they're moving away kind of from like church norms because we're old and traditional, right? And we just want people to never have sex and to have terrible lives, right? So I get that, right? That's what people think of church often. Changing social norms. It's just becoming more regular. More of it's happening, so people are more accepting of it. They say another reason is there's a greater desire to or necessity to live together because it's just so much more expensive to live on your own. So it just seems easier. Why don't we just move in together? So there's the economic reasons, which actually is a really big reason why some people choose to live together. And you're like, with what money? So I got another poor person living with me? That's not helping, right? But that's one of the reasons. Other people say it's for an increased chance of happiness and success. In fact, this is over 50% believe that moving in with a significant other before tying the knot is a good idea. The cohabitation before marriage or even engagement can increase their chances of a happy and successful marriage. So people are believing. Other people say it's for love or desire. They just want to spend more time with their significant other. Aw, that's so cute, right? 80% of women who want to cohabitate say it's because of love, compared to 63% of men who say they do it out of love. It's like, no, it's just a lot cheaper. I don't want to drive back home, right? Like, oh, yeah, and I love you too. I'd be interested to know what your reasons are and kind of like why you are or why you've considered it or maybe why certain friends of yours consider it. Like, I'd be interested to know. But this is kind of from all these studies, these are the big things that kind of come up. And so, of course, we're going to have to ask, well, what does the Bible say about it? The Bible is actually like fairly clear on this. And it's interesting thing is it's not like you can go to the Bible and be like, where's the section on dating, right? Like, where's the section on common law marriage? You're not going to find that, right? What you get is this general wisdom throughout Scripture of just like, there's just some terrible decisions you can make and some better decisions to make. And you kind of have to parse through some of it. But there's some general, but I would say really clear teachings on what this looks like. I mean, right at the beginning, Genesis chapter 1, Genesis meaning beginning, so the first book of the Bible, chapter 2 says this, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. There's this idea of this constant union. It's all life together. It's where the whole idea of kind of marriage comes from, and that sexual union. It's like, it's just you, me, and nobody else, we become one. It says in Hebrews 13, it says, marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and all the sexually immoral. It draws a clear distinction between that which is pure and honorable, which is marriage, and that which is sexually immoral, anything outside of marriage. And living together, no, I'm not talking about like getting a roommate, just in case maybe you're just not tracking with me just yet. You're tired, you're late, or you're just dense. I'm meaning a couple who's dating, living together, okay? And it's like, no, well, we just like, we high five. I'm like, okay, that's what you call it now. And so the idea of sleeping together, and like we talked about last week, that is something that Bob is very clear about. It's sexually immoral. That's not something you should be doing. We talked about that, the sanctity of sex, and why it's great in the marriage, and we'll talk a bit about it again tonight, but it's clear. And last, there is this wonderful, like this beautiful story of Jesus meeting this woman at the well in the book of John, chapter 4. And this woman has had multiple husbands. And it's this grace-filled conversation, but I want to highlight one area. He confirms with her, saying that she's had multiple husbands and living with someone who's not her husband, and says, for you've had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband. And as much as he leads her to grace, he doesn't shy away from the fact that that was a sin. And so it's pretty clear that Scripture is not for the idea of living together before marriage. And like, well, of course he'd say that. You're the church. You're a pastor. You're probably sponsored by Big Marriage, right? You'd be right. They pay really well. No, I wish. No. So the question is the Bible just outdated? I mean, it was like it's an ancient, Near Eastern text to a couple thousand years ago. Is it out of touch with where we're at culture today? Because culture today is very different than it was there, because people back then, they didn't have sex. And so what about now? That was a joke. It seems like a wise thing to do now. And maybe the Bible's just not there. And maybe you're sitting here going, yeah, this is all good, but that's not really for me. The Bible is an old book. Well, what I'm going to tell you tonight, I'm going to let you know, I'm very, very careful in a message like this not to tell you just what I think. It's very important for me to tell you what studies are showing, A, because I think you need to know, and B, because I want you to know that I'm not trying to give you a biased look on things. But here is what studies are showing over and over and over again in the last 40 years when they've been tracking this phenomenon of a growing amount of people living together. Generally, it says this, couples who live together before marriage, and even more so before engagement, divorce more often than those who don't. The result is consistent enough for researchers to have named it the cohabitating effect. It's got a name. You know it's real when they give it a name. Cohabitating unions are much less stable than marriages. Some studies showing that only about 6% of cohabitating relationships that have not transitioned to marriage are still intact 10 years later. Relationships that begin with cohabitation are almost twice as likely to end than those that began with marriage, regardless of whether they eventually marry or not. Crazy. And I gotta be honest, I was surprised when I was reading this. I read multiple studies to go, I just want to make sure that I'm not like, oh man, I landed on the this is what Thomas wants to say page, right? Like, I wanted to check a few different references. But over and over again, this was being said. And this is by a lot of people just, they're not like Christians or anything like that, just going, this is surprising to them as well, especially considering it's becoming a growing trend. They say married adults are also more likely than those who are cohabitating to say they have a great deal of trust in their spouse or partner, to be faithful to them, act in their best interest, always tell them the truth, and handle money responsibly, and have a higher level of relationship satisfaction. All of us want a relationship where we can trust them. All of us want a relationship and we feel like they're being honest with us. All of us want a relationship where we feel like we're getting to know each other. We all want a healthy, long-lasting, fulfilling relationship. We're not in it just for the good times. And a lot of us are thinking, could this be a way that we can get that without maybe having to really get to that marriage spot? Or maybe that's just a wise thing to do before we get married, but it's over and over again telling us, maybe the Bible's not as irrelevant as you think it is. Further, it says this: married individuals who lived with their spouses before engagement report having poorer quality marriages in terms of general satisfaction, the negativity of their communication, confidence in the future of the relationship commitment, and a level of friendship with each other, as well as greater self-reported divorce potential than those who live together after engagement or not at all before marriage. It's a huge deal. Wouldn't you want to know that? Married adults are also more likely than those who are cohabitating to say that they have a great deal of trust in their spouse or partner to be faithful to them. Act in their best interest, always tell them the truth, and handle money. I just repeated that quote. I didn't cut that out of my script. The Lord wanted you to hear that twice. Cohabitating changes attitudes about marriage and divorce, lowering esteem for marriage and increasing acceptance of divorce. This is consistent with scores of studies in psychology that show that attitudes will cohere to behavior. It's the whole premise of compromise. Is tomorrow's compromise just requires today's behavior and today's compromise. And so it's easy to justify something you don't want to change. And so they're saying when people are just behaving this way, the attitudes change about it. Attitudes about marriage and maybe not needing it and the acceptance of divorce. One famous study shows that those who listed made sense financially and to test the relationship as the top reason were actually more likely to get divorced, which is wild. The association between premarital cohabitation and divorce has not declined over the years in any substantial manner, despite more and more people doing it and becoming more and more acceptable. So as more people are doing it, you would think that these things would be changing. It has not changed one iota. They're still seeing the same results, no matter how much more popular it's becoming. And if it wasn't bad enough, research has found that cohabitating individuals have lower sensual and sexual satisfaction than married individuals. So we're like, no, it ain't for me anymore. Girl, move out, right? It's at that point. You're like, no way. But why? Again, you'd want to know this because you were created for good sex. And this is lower than what God has made for you. I got to tell you, and I'm honest when I'm telling you, I was surprised by some of the results. Now, there are a few ways that you can circumvent some of this, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but the first question is this then. Well, what is leading to all this negative? Why is it so bad? What are the reasons for this? There's a lot of reasons, but for the sake of just time, I'll focus on two. One is, it's actually two terms. The one term is called sliding. The next term is called inertia, okay? Go with me on this. So sliding is this. So many couples just literally slide into cohabitation. It's just like, well, it seems like the next thing to do. Let's just do it. It seems fun. You hear all the time. Just bring your toothbrush next time, right? You know, like all those TV shows tell us that's how you move in. And they do it without really discussing what it means for the relationship and what it means about their future. It's just like, no, well, we might as well just hang out, right? Like, we've totally pushed all our friends away already. Like, let's just be us and no more. They literally slide into it. And what's really interesting about it is that they slide in without understanding that they probably have some very high risk factors. Risk factors being economic risk factors, relational risk factors, emotional, age, typically younger. Again, it's more popular among 18 to 24-year-olds. Also, another risk is that they have either poor intimacy or poor communication skills. Their attitude and behavior in social circles and their support, they typically lack in that. For example, it says both parties have likely developed a thought pattern of, what if it doesn't work out? Thinking you could just move out and move on, which can undermine the sense of commitment that is essential to a thriving marriage. Other risk factors say is lack of experience or maturity, lack of education, and no plans beyond. They say couples who slide into cohabitation, who do not make a mutual commitment to marriage, would be most at risk for later marital difficulties. And so what happens is that you have these risk factors. You slide into it because you're like, I'm not thinking about getting married maybe, but it's just like, this is great. I want to be closer to you. This would be great. It would be cheaper for us. This is great. This is the next level. We're making a big commitment with each other. I'm so proud of us being so mature. Because that's what we think. And I get that. And it seems really practical. And some of you are mature. And some of you really do love each other. And some of you really want to be close with each other. The problem is that when you slide in, you've got these risk factors. There's a second thing that happens. It's called inertia. Think of like a ball or a snowball rolling down a hill and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That's what basically inertia is. So cohabitation makes it harder. This is maybe surprising to you. Surprising to me is that cohabitation actually makes it harder for people to break up, which is really interesting. See, because of the inertia of living together, some people get stuck longer than they otherwise would, and they would have maybe even left these relationships a lot sooner, but because of inertia, it's just harder to do that. In fact, they believe that some people marry someone they would otherwise have left because cohabitation just made it too difficult, too risky, or made it too frustrating to stop. So they call it the you'll do versus the I do effect. That a lot of cohabiting couples will say, you know what, we've gone this far, you'll do. And it's really hard to think that there's another option because we started living together. For a lot of reasons, it makes it that much harder. And you're saying, but wouldn't marriage be a lot more difficult? But you got to think about it, though. Someone walking into a marriage, typically what happens is that they choose to get married, so they invite a lot more factors into it. They invite more people. They have more experience in forming their mutual commitment. There is this sense of, we know what, we're building a life together, we're going forward. Those who are cohabitating typically don't have those kinds of conversations. They're not making those decisions, either because they're too young or too unstable to do those things. And the thing is that this prediction is consistently supported with well over 7 or more reports across multiple studies. It's the lock-in effect. It's the sunken cost fallacy. We've gone this far, why don't we just keep going? It's hard to think of getting out of this. This is what they're saying. The inertia hypothesis has been supported over and over and over again over the years as a real reason why some of these risk factors and some of the things that they're seeing about cohabitated couples, this is the results that they're getting. And let me give you an example. And I got to tell you, these are a little uncomfortable. And I also want to give a bit of a warning. There is, and I don't use this lightly, a bit of a trigger warning here. I am going to be talking about different kinds of abuses. I just want to give you a heads up. I'm not going to go into detail, but I just don't want to just clobber you in the side of the head without warning you about it. Here's how sliding in inertia compounds risk factors. Those with cohabitating parents, speaking of kids, so actually, let me back up here. Cohabitating women were more likely to report having an unintended birth, 43.5%, almost half, compared to married women at 23.9%. The reason why this is important, because those with cohabitating parents are more likely to experience the breakup of their families, be exposed to complex family forms, live in poverty, suffer abuse, and have negative psychological and educational outcomes. It compounds for our kids. Children born to cohabitating parents see their parents break up more often than do children born to married parents. Children born to cohabitating parents experience nearly 3 times as many family transitions entering into or dissolving a marital or a union as those born to married parents. Being born into a cohabitating family, they say, sets the stage for later instability for children. The number of family transitions experienced by children in cohabitating unions has changed relatively little in the last 20 years. Data from the 4th National Incidence Study of Child Abuse and Neglect shows that children living with biological cohabitating parents are over 4 times as likely to be physically, sexually, and emotionally abused as those living with their own married parents. Canadian research indicates children with one natural parent and one step-parent or cohabitating partner were 40 times more likely to become child abuse cases compared to those with both biological parents. Wild. What's the context? Cohabitating households are less stable, and children are 170% more likely to experience a parental breakup, kind of what we talked about. Research suggests that parental cohabitation has an independent negative impact on child safety beyond factors like socioeconomic status, and children will witness intimate partner violence in cohabitating relationships, which will lead to a greater risk for direct abuse more than they would with parents who are married. Let's take a breath. It's a lot of information. And I know you're thinking, did you just pull out all the bad stuff? Guys, I didn't have to work hard at that. This is over and over and over again. This is stuff that I read 5 years ago and still reading to this day. It's one of those things where it's like, the reason why I kind of get pumped this way about it is going, because I want you to have God's best. I want you to experience something that is great and wonderful. And there is a way that seems right to us, but it's not God's best. My job is to help you know the difference between the common and the holy. You're called to the holy, to what is good for you, to what brings life and life to the fullest. Because like I said last week, you're not just called to yourself. No, you're first called to God. You're called to serve and love your neighbor. And then you end up benefiting because of that. The decisions we make can't be done in isolation. Decisions we make affect other people. This is what we're seeing. Okay. But are there any benefits, though? Yeah, kind of. So there are fewer of the inevitable surprises that come with marriage, of course, right? You think about it. You're living together. There's not as many surprises. Maybe less disappointment. You're like, yeah, I kind of knew that you chewed like a wild animal, right? And that your laugh, you sound like a hyena, and I knew you were in prison. That's why I loved you, because I always knew where you were, right? And so it's like, it can cushion us against some of the stress, right, associated with like moving in with someone. They say sometimes it allows couples to build some trust with each other through increased vulnerability, that it can strengthen relationships through shared responsibilities, increased intimacy, and in some cases, enhance financial stability, right? Like, that seems really obvious and practical, and those are some benefits. But let me give you a bit of context on these. Every piece of research has shown, though, this is only the case when a couple first makes a commitment to marriage before moving in with each other. Which, to me, is like, why didn't you just wait? It's like, because we want to spend 4 months engaged, sleeping with each other when we know we shouldn't. Well, you shouldn't. And what's interesting is this. Cohabitation before marriage was associated with a lower risk of divorce in the first year of marriage, but a higher risk thereafter. They interpreted this finding in light of experience theories, noting that living together before marriage can give couples a leg up at the very start of marriage because there's less of an adjustment to being married and specifically living together. But they found this advantage to be short-lived. Literally, there's no advantage after the first year of marriage. They say what happens then is some of the risk factors begin to kick in after the first year of marriage. So there are advantages within the context of if a couple first makes a commitment to get married, they're moving towards their future, and they start doing that. And if you're here and you don't follow Jesus, you need to hear me say this. This is actually for everybody. I'm not your dad. I can't tell you what to do. I don't want to tell you what to do. I'm just giving you facts. But if you are here specifically and you don't follow Jesus, I especially don't want to tell you what you need to do. But what I would encourage you to do, though, is going, you probably want the best kind of turnout for your marriage. Like, no one's like, I can't wait to get married so I can have a terrible divorce. I just can't wait, right? We never want to do that. But there are things that we do before we get married that actually say that we are okay with the risk of it later. And this is all I'm trying to say. How do we just limit some of that risk? Because maybe the other question is like, but isn't divorce common anyways? What's really the difference? Well, interestingly enough, divorce is actually steadily declining. And it's not because more people are just living together. What's really interesting, and I find this really funny, it's because actually relationship trends. What they're finding is that couples are marrying later on in life. Some of you are like, I'm 27, I might as well be retired, I'm not even married, what's going on, right? Like, don't worry, right? You're okay. So some of you are like, man, I'm not married yet, what's going on? It's actually, relationship trends are showing, and I said it last week too, people are getting married later in life. But also, people are achieving higher levels of education and financial stability, which is associated with lower divorce risks. Also, experts predict a future drop in divorce rates as well, because what they're noticing is that people are actually taking marriage more seriously now, and they're protecting the institution, because the more serious someone takes it, the better the outcome, because the behavior changes your attitudes towards something. And then vice versa. The attitude shifts your behaviors. So divorce is declining. And I think a lot of people come into this idea of marriage because there's a lot of baggage, rightful baggage, of either your own parents, of maybe people that you know. It just seems ugly. I get that. But it's one of those things where, like, we can't just abandon something that has a higher chance of a safer, more successful, fulfilling, long-term high quality of life for you, for kids, and for society, just because it doesn't work for everybody, or hasn't worked for everybody. Because there's a greater danger in doing it another way. See, what divorce is telling us is not that you shouldn't get married. No, what divorce is telling us, and what we're finding in trends, is that people are beginning to realize we need to be really discerning and wise as we get into our relationships. We can't take it lightly. We can't do it quickly. It's telling us also that we're all human. We're all mess-ups. We can't do it on our own. It is one of the reasons why, still, people with a faith and who attend church more regularly have a much lower rate of divorce than those who don't. And it's telling us, don't put yourself in a more risky situation. Be wise about it. That's what divorce is telling us. That's what we're starting to see trends begin to shift and change. Okay, so you're telling me if I wait till I'm a little older, would the risks go down then if we decide to live together? If you're really, really bent on it. Unironically, the rate of people who choose to live together drops significantly after the age of 25. You know what happens around the age of 25? Do you know? Your brain. Actually, like the prefrontal cortex, where all the decision-making parts of your brain is fully formed between 24 and 26 years old. So you're just not as dumb. And so, and I say that with literally all the love in my heart. It's the reason why a lot of people, between 18 and 24 do have a hard time making decisions about their future and things like that. It's like, I don't know what to do. I know. You literally don't know, right? Like, I get that. I've got so much grace for you. I tell people, if you're switching your degrees, hey, yeah, that sounds pretty normal, right? Like, and you're trying to like build a life with someone at that point, you crazy. So after 25, it drops. They don't want to do that as much. Like, and I don't mean just like, it's like, right? Like, it really goes off the map. And the reality is that many people who live together aren't ready, they're not capable, they're not mature enough, and have no experience or lack of experience to take on such a high responsibility of making a lifelong commitment? And it's simple. If you want a long-lasting, fulfilling relationship, move towards marriage, bro. And what I'm not saying is make every date a chance to propose, right? It's not like, girl, I don't want to date you, I want to marry you. No, you are weird. That's not what I'm telling you to do. I'm just saying, if you're like getting to know someone and you're dating in community, like I told you to do last week, and you're realizing, wow, Thomas was right, and you're just enjoying it, it's great, and you're just at a point where you're like, hey, girl, boy, let's make this happen, I would say, then do the hard work of pursuing marriage. Get the right checks and balances. Do what you need to do. Don't make it harder on yourself. I said last week, I'll say it again. Marriage is awesome, but the minute people get married, you realize, man, life is pretty normal. It goes slow. It's like, yeah, I had sex. That was great. But like, it's like Tuesday. I got to go to work. Like, it's just like, awesome, right? It's just, and so I would just say, like, honestly, if you're right there, and I'm like, and if you're a Christian, I'm just going to make clear, you shouldn't. You're compromising, and you're leading someone else into compromise. Your decisions, especially on relationships, are not done in isolation. You're a fool if you think they are. Okay, I'll move on. Is there another way then? Thomas, is there another way? We're not going to live together, but like, how do we get more prepared together without like sliding into living together? We don't really want to get married yet, but we just want to get to know each other. I don't want to tell you for sure how to date, but here's what I say. I shared a passage last week, and it's from Romans. In Romans chapter 12, verse 2, it says, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. I want to move you from the common to the holy. And so I'm going to ask this question first. Again, you have to ask, what do you want? And does it square with what God wants, what he has for you? And I would say, honestly, for you, whether you're single, you're dating, or you're ready to get married, desire marriage. Not for marriage's sake, but what it means. Because God made it for your good. It's a gift. It's his will for your life. It's his call for your life. Why? Like in the Old Testament, you read it, and there's like these nations, whatever they do, they would make these like blood covenants, right? And we have this picture of God who takes this animal sacrifice and he cuts it in half. It's a little gory and gross. And he just like sets apart the two halves. And there's like this line of blood. And the idea is that as each person steps over it, it's like a legal relational commitment, life and death. Until death comes, we're responsible to each other. The image that we get in the Old Testament is that he doesn't ask us to cross it first. God crosses it first and says, until I die, you are my people. I don't know if you know, God doesn't die. And then he invites us to step over. So when Jesus' body was broken and his blood bled down, the covenant that was made, he calls us his bride. He's our groom. It's a life commitment. And when we get married, it's a sign pointing to the relationship that God desires for us. And it's a relationship and a love that we can share with one another in marriage is a safe, unconditional love that in full vulnerability and transparency, we can trust that until death, I will choose to love you like God loves me. Guys, let's marry someone right now. That's just beautiful. This is what God has for you. That is the safest way to feel love. No, girl, I love you. Really? Is he ready to commit and give himself up for you? Including his sexual desire for you. I just tried to find a really clean way of saying that. Is she tempting you to compromise in your faith? She's not ready to give herself for your good. That's not the kind of love that God has for you. That's not the kind of love that God gives for you. He doesn't lead you into temptation. He doesn't make you compromise. He's here to bear good fruit in you. Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, gentleness, self-control. It's the love that is full and healthy and whole. And when we get married and we hold on to marriage, we tell the world that this is a love that you were designed for. You become a signpost of God's goodness, of God's love, of what God intends for them. When you have good marriages, when you've got great sex and great marriages and good friendship and good relationships, the world gets a picture of what God desires with each one of them. That's why I love marriage, man. Me and my wife, 20 years this August, and I gotta tell you, there's a lot of years where it was not easy for us. Imagine being married to me. Ugh. It's not easy. But when both of us look at each other, we're like, Catherine, like Thomas, but we don't want a crappy marriage. Right? It'd be easy to jump out and start somewhere else. Actually be very difficult, but you know what I mean, right? And you know what the problem with you going to another relationship? You know what the problem is? Is that you're in that relationship. That's the problem. And I know some divorce, of course, if people are abused, things like that, those things are just I'm not saying that you should stay in a marriage no matter what, right? But there's often, Catherine and I, we just have to, and often it's me, where I'm like, man, I just got to get over my ego and I got to apologize. It's selfishness. I'm demanding from her where God has called me. How am I serving and loving her? Because that's what God does for me. It's not always easy, but man, I got to tell you, I love that woman so much more today than I did the day I married her. Mostly because she still puts up with me, but also just because she's just awesome. And I was like, she's perfect for me. Because over the years, we kept our hearts soft before God and before each other, and we formed something much more beautiful than we could have done on our own. Because we did the hard work, guys. We didn't press the eject button, and we didn't try to do it. Someone's alarm went off because Thomas, you're done. These were not even my notes. So God made it for your good, all right? God made it for your kids' good. It provides stability in every way. It sets your kids up for a better chance, and God made it for society's good. Healthy marriages create healthier communities. That's just a known fact. Again, community is key. Get your guys in a really good community, date in community. It keeps you accountable. It manages your pace better. Some of you are living, that's the problem with living together too, is that you act like you're married when you're not. But you're so far deep into it, you've got to act like you're married because, you're living with this person. How awkward is it to not be dating someone that you're living with? Right? Be in a community that it supports that environment, understands, expects God's best for you, and holds you to that. It helps you learn about who the other person is and who you are. Helps build skills that you're wanting to build together. Helps you see what the others don't. Have a serious conversation with yourself and your significant other. Where are we going with this? What's happening? Man, I got to move on. If you're in a point where you're ready to get married, I say this to a lot of couples I have for years. If you're like, man, I think we need to go to the marriage thing, don't get engaged before you do premarital counseling. I don't say do premarital counseling once you get engaged. Nope. The better way to do it is before you get engaged, get premarital counseling. They say couples who get premarriage counseling, once a date is set, is they've already had to finance the marriage or the wedding. So if there's something that comes up during counseling that you're uncomfortable with, you're less likely to deal with it or to push it away because you've already spent a lot of money. So do it before you get engaged. So if there's issues, you can deal with those issues. Anyways, that was for free. If you're like, but man, I can't make it on my own, get roommates. And it doesn't have to be your boyfriend or your girlfriend. Get roommates. This is better to rely on for financial responsibilities. It learns who you are, what it's like to accommodate someone. All these things that they say that you can get out of living together, it's like, yeah, you can get that in so many other ways, okay? But what if we're already living together? I'm going to make this quick. And if you have more questions, I'll stick around after. I can expand on it a lot more, but I have to make it quick because I didn't honor the time last week. I got to do it this week. Not because they're telling me or they're angry with me. It's my own. Anyways, you're like, is that guy having a stroke? What if they're already living together? If you're a Christian, well, you shouldn't. And so I love that you guys do baptisms here. It's awesome. And I always love baptisms at the project. People are like, cheering, it's awesome, right? And I know there's like 8,000 of you that get baptized every week now, and so, which is great. Here's one thing I'll encourage you to do. If you are living together and you're a Christian, it's now time for you to live out your baptism, okay? Live it out. Baptism is a sign of what God's done, but also of going, I want to be obedient to him. You got to find a way to be obedient here. But I don't like it. I know. And I do feel for you because I know it's very complicated. The enmeshment that's happened, I get it. You got to work out what does it look like to be obedient. And you're going to have to pull someone else into that conversation to help you sort through those things out. Allow the pressure for the altar. I'm not telling you to get married, but you got to ask yourself, why won't we get married? That's going to tell you a lot of where your relationship's at. And it could be age, it could be where you're at, and you're like, if you're not ready, then why are you living together? If you're a believer, you know this. Desire marriage. If you're a non-Christian and a Christian, right? Like, I got saved, and I'm living with someone, and like, it's weird. And this is a common occurrence. I know this happens. And I encourage you to, again, allow the pressure for the altar. I don't advocate for you guys getting married, but what I do say is you got to have the conversation. What does this mean? You know, I was chatting last week with someone, but this is something I've had for a lot of people, is especially if you're a non-Christian dating a Christian, they always say, like, well, you know, like, Christians can't date non-Christians. And you're right, it's there, but do you know why? I would say the same thing if it was like a Muslim and a Buddhist. There's value differentiators here. Could you imagine being a Christian, living with someone for the rest of your life who doesn't value faith like you do? How are you going to raise your kids? How are you going to make those decisions? What if you want to take them to church with you, but they don't want to? Or you're just like, you know, you want to share part of what's happening with God in your life, which is awesome. You can't expect them to receive that and be okay with it. And they're not a bad person, but that's just not their thing. And for you to be like, no, they'll change. Believe me, I can change them. You know, it's like you're just telling them over and over again that they're not good enough. And so what happens is one of three things. Either chaos, just constantly fighting about it, or it's going to be a chasm between you two, growing distance because you can't share a part of your life, a major part of your life, or compromise. There's no other option. Okay, I'll move on. If you're a non-Christian, I just say everything that you've heard, you're responsible to deal with now. What does that mean for us? Okay, I get it. All right? I get it. It's a siren now. That was a lot. One last reminder. There's nothing that will have a greater impact on your life than the relationships that you choose to have, especially the most intimate ones, and especially in the way that you hold them. Date, live, be friends, and get married like you have a calling of God on your life. Date, live, be friends, get married like God wants to use you to declare to the world that there's a God who loves them with an unending love. And what if the way that you had your relationships could not just set you free, but keep you free and set others free? Wouldn't that be incredible? And you can. I know you can. I believe you can. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, and in view of God's mercy and all the things that he's done for you, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice that's holy, not common, holy and pleasing to God. This is true and proper worship to God. Don't conform to the patterns of this world. The patterns of broken bodies, broken hearts, broken minds, broken kids. But be transformed by the Spirit of God who comes to give life and life to the fullest, by the renewing of your mind, then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is. His will that is good, pleasing, and perfect for you. That's my prayer for you. Date that way. Live that way. Be friends that way. Get married that way. Amen? Why don't you stand? Let's worship together.